Claire sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the pale light slipping through the curtains. Her house was quiet, too quiet. 15 years of marriage, and silence had become their routine language. Daniel was in his home office downstairs, like always, working late on his laptop. Even when he was home, it felt like he wasn't really there. There was a time when his laughter filled every room. He used to leave her little notes on the fridge, bring her coffee in bed, and talk about their dreams. But somewhere between bills, deadlines, and aging days, all that warmth had thinned. Now, their conversations circled around grocery lists and tax deadlines. Claire wasn't angry, just tired of being invisible. She was still the same woman he fell in love with. Kind, gentle, loyal. But she felt like a photograph fading in the background of his busy life. And though she told herself this was what marriage became after years together, deep down she still longed to be seen again. That afternoon at her flower shop, she arranged a bouquet of lilies, Daniel's favorite. The smell reminded her of when they first dated, when everything between them was new and effortless. The bell above the door jingled and Olivia stepped in. Olivia was her oldest friend. A woman who carried energy like sunlight. She was single, confident, always smiling, the kind of person who made every room brighter. They'd met in college, drifted apart, and found each other again after Claire opened her flower shop. Olivia leaned on the counter. "You look like you haven't slept in days," she teased. Claire smiled weakly. "Maybe I haven't. Daniel's birthday is next week, and I want it to be special. But honestly, I don't even know what would make him happy anymore." Olivia frowned. "He's been distant, hasn't he?" Claire nodded, her voice soft. "We barely talk these days. He's kind, but it feels like we live beside each other, not together. Sometimes I feel like I'm married to a shadow." There was a moment of silence before Olivia said, "Maybe he just forgot how to see you. Men get stuck in their heads. They forget the woman they have right in front of them." Claire chuckled sadly. "And how do I remind him?" Olivia grinned. "Do something unexpected. Shake him a little. Show him something he didn't know he needed." The words lingered. Something unexpected. That night, as Claire lay beside Daniel, his soft snores breaking the silence, her mind replayed Olivia's advice. She didn't want to test him, but she wanted to wake him up, remind him of love, emotion, passion. Anything that made them feel alive again. A strange idea formed, something she couldn't explain, even to herself. She thought of giving Daniel a different kind of gift. Not material, not ordinary, something emotional. Something that would make him see her again. The next morning, she called Olivia. "I want your help," she said. "For Daniel's birthday." "Of course," Olivia replied. "What do you have in mind?" Claire hesitated. "I want you to spend time with him. Make him laugh, talk to him, get him to open up. I'll be there too, but in the background, I just want to watch him come alive again." There was a long pause. "Claire," Olivia said gently, "are you sure about this? I know how it sounds," Claire cut in. "I just need to know if there's anything left between us. If he can still feel something. Maybe if he remembers what it's like to connect again. He'll come back to me." Olivia reluctantly agreed. She didn't like the plan, but she loved Claire enough to go along. The following week, Claire planned a quiet birthday dinner. She invited only a few close friends, but secretly, she centered the evening around Olivia and Daniel's interaction. She wanted to observe, not interfere. On the day of the party, Claire decorated their dining room with soft lights and candles. The table looked beautiful, neat, warm, inviting. She wore a soft cream dress Daniel had bought her years ago, but never noticed any more. When Daniel came home, he looked surprised. "You did all this?" he asked, his face lighting up. "Of course," Claire said. "Happy birthday." He hugged her briefly before being distracted by the sight of Olivia. "You made it," he said, smiling. Olivia grinned. "I wouldn't miss it." I helped Claire with a few things. Throughout the evening, the three of them talked and laughed. At first, Claire felt happy watching Daniel relax for the first time in months. He laughed more in 1 hour than he had all year. But as time passed, a strange heaviness grew inside her. She noticed how Daniel's eyes followed Olivia's energy, how he smiled differently, freely, without the guarded look he often gave Claire. It wasn't romantic, but it was attention. Attention that used to belong to her. Claire stayed quiet, trying to convince herself this was what she wanted, to see him happy again. But it hurt more than she expected. After dinner, Daniel helped Olivia carry dishes to the kitchen. Claire stood in the hallway, watching them through the doorway. The light from the chandelier fell softly across their faces. They were talking easily, their laughter low and familiar. For a moment, Claire saw what had been missing from her marriage. When Olivia left later that night, Daniel hugged her goodbye. It was friendly, nothing more. But to Claire, it felt like a mirror reflecting everything she had lost. As Daniel turned back toward her, she forced a smile. "Did you have a good time?" "The best," he said. "It's been so long since I laughed like that. Olivia's great. She's easy to talk to." "I'm glad," Claire said, her voice calm though her heart ached. That night, she lay awake beside him, staring at the ceiling. Her plan had worked. He was happier, lighter. But the happiness wasn't because of her. It came from someone else. She thought about all the moments they'd lost. Dinners eaten in silence. Weekends spent apart. Love fading in the quiet. And now, another woman, her friend, had managed to bring out what she'd been begging for silently for years. She didn't hate Olivia. She hated herself for needing her. The next morning, Daniel left early for work. When he was gone, Claire stood by the window, staring at the empty driveway. She felt like she had opened a door she couldn't close. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from Olivia. "He's a good man, Claire. He just seems lonely. Don't lose him now." Claire typed back, "I don't plan to. But I think I already did." That day, as she worked in her flower shop, her hands trembled while arranging roses. Every petal reminded her of love, fragile, soft, and so easy to bruise. That evening, when Daniel came home, he mentioned Olivia again, how nice it was to talk to someone outside of work, someone who listened without judging. Claire smiled politely, her throat tight. She knew then that she had made a terrible mistake. What she thought was a harmless experiment had become something more dangerous, a test of emotions she couldn't control. That night, as Daniel drifted to sleep beside her, she whispered into the dark, "I gave you another woman, Daniel, but maybe I gave away something I'll never get back." And though he didn't hear her, the truth hung heavy between them, unseen but alive. The following days felt like walking through a fog. Claire woke up early each morning, made breakfast, and watched Daniel rush out the door with a cup of coffee in his hand. He seemed lighter, more talkative, more alive, but that new energy wasn't coming from her. He had started texting Olivia. Claire noticed it when he left his phone on the counter while stepping into the shower. She didn't mean to look, but when the screen lit up, her heart almost stopped. It wasn't anything inappropriate, just casual messages about a podcast, a funny meme, a joke about work, but it still burned. When he came downstairs, towel around his neck, she forced a smile. "You've seemed happy lately," she said. He looked up, surprised. "Yeah, I guess I am. Work's been good, and it's nice to talk to someone outside of the usual routine, you know? Olivia's easy to talk to. She understands things without making me feel judged." Claire nodded, pretending to understand, though her stomach twisted. She wanted to scream that she had been the one listening for 15 years. She had been the one who cared when he broke down from stress, when he couldn't sleep, when he lost his father. But somehow, he only noticed warmth when it came from someone new. That night, she sat in her flower shop after closing time, lights dimmed, staring at a bouquet of red tulips. Tulips had always meant forgiveness. She wondered who should be asking for it, Daniel, Olivia, or herself. Olivia called her that evening. "Claire, can we talk?" Claire hesitated but answered, "Of course, I feel like things are getting strange. Daniel's been messaging me a lot. It's innocent, but I don't want you to think I'm crossing a line." Claire's voice was calm, almost too calm. "You're not. I asked you to help him open up." "Maybe it's working," Olivia sighed. "It's working too well, maybe. He's lonely, Claire. He keeps talking about how he misses connection, not just with you, but with himself. I think you both need to talk honestly." Claire closed her eyes. "I don't even know how anymore." "Start simple," Olivia said. "Tell him what you miss. Tell him what hurts. Don't wait until it's too late." But Claire didn't. She couldn't. Every time she tried to talk to Daniel, the words stuck. He wasn't unkind, just distant, like someone living behind a glass wall. A week later, Olivia stopped by the house to return a book Daniel had lent her. Claire opened the door, smiling faintly. "Hey," Olivia said. "I thought I'd drop this off before I forget." Daniel appeared behind Claire, his expression lighting up in surprise. "Olivia, you didn't have to come all the way here. I was in the neighborhood," she said, stepping inside. They talked for a few minutes, casual, friendly. But Claire felt invisible again, standing there like an observer in her own marriage. She excused herself to the kitchen under the pretense of making tea. From there she could hear their laughter, soft, effortless, natural. When she returned, Olivia was sitting on the couch, and Daniel was showing her something on his laptop. The scene looked harmless, yet it sliced through Claire's chest. After Olivia left, Daniel turned to Claire. "You don't mind me being friends with her, do you? She's good company. It's nice to have someone who understands things." Claire's voice cracked slightly. "And I don't." He hesitated, rubbing the back of his neck. "You do, of course you do, but it's different. You've been, I don't know, distant too." Her eyes filled with tears. "Maybe I became distant because I felt invisible, Daniel. Because every time I tried to reach you, you were somewhere else in your work, in your thoughts, anywhere but with me." He looked down, guilt flickering across his face. "I didn't mean to make you feel that way." "No," she said softly, "but meaning and doing are different things." That night, they didn't argue. They just sat in silence, side by side, yet oceans apart. Days passed, and Claire decided to take Olivia's advice, to speak her heart, even if it hurt. So she planned a quiet dinner for just the two of them. Candles, soft music, a homemade meal, the kind of evening they hadn't shared in years. Daniel came home late. He looked surprised to see the table set, the candles glowing. "This looks nice," he said. "I thought we could have dinner. Just us." He smiled and sat down. They ate quietly at first, then slowly conversation began to flow. Claire talked about her shop, her dreams of expanding it, her worries about them drifting apart. Then she asked, "Do you still love me, Daniel?" He looked stunned. "Of course I do." "Then why does it feel like you don't see me anymore?" He sighed. "I don't know, Claire. Life happened. Work happened. I guess I lost sight of what we had. But it's not because I stopped caring." "Then fight for it," she whispered. "Fight for us." There was silence. He reached across the table, touching her hand gently. It wasn't passionate, but it was real. "I want to," he said. "I just don't know where to start." "Start here," she replied. For the first time in months, they looked at each other, really looked. The walls between them began to thin, even if only slightly. But rebuilding wasn't that simple. 2 days later, Claire found out Daniel had met Olivia for coffee. He mentioned it casually, not realizing how it would sound. "She wanted to talk about you," he said. "She's worried about how distant we've been." Claire's heart pounded. "You talked about me." "Yeah, she said you've been struggling. I didn't realize it was that bad." Claire's voice trembled. "You didn't realize because you weren't looking." That night, when Daniel went to bed, she sat by the window, tears blurring her view of the city lights. She wasn't angry at Olivia, she was angry at fate. She had asked her friend to help her husband remember love. And now she was the one being forgotten. Still, Olivia didn't want to hurt her. The next morning, she showed up at the flower shop. "Claire," she said gently, "I think I need to step back. He's growing too comfortable with me, and I don't want to be the reason you two fall apart." Claire's eyes softened. "You're not the reason." "I am. I brought you into this. I wanted to wake him up. I just didn't think he'd wake up and look away from me." "Then take him back," Olivia said. "Before he forgets where home is." Claire nodded. That weekend, Daniel came home early from work. She decided to face things head on. "Daniel," she said, standing in the kitchen, "I want to tell you something." When I asked Olivia to spend time with you, I did it because I was desperate. I wanted you to remember how to feel again. I wanted to see if there was anything left in you that could still love. I thought if you could connect with someone, maybe you'd remember how to connect with me." He looked stunned. "You asked her to?" "Yes, but it got out of control. I thought I was helping us. Instead, I made it worse." He was silent for a long moment. Then he whispered, "Claire, I don't even know what to say." "Say that you still want to try," she said, tears spilling down her cheeks. He stepped closer, his voice trembling. "I do, but I also need to figure out why I stopped trying in the first place." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The air felt heavy with everything they hadn't said over the years. That night, Daniel didn't sleep in his office. He stayed beside her. They didn't touch, but they lay quietly, their hearts beating to the same painful rhythm. And for the first time in a long time, Claire felt something fragile but real. She knew they weren't fixed. But maybe, just maybe, they were beginning to see each other again, still. One thought haunted her. Had she already crossed a line that could never be uncrossed? The night Sarah realized what she had done, she couldn't sleep. The sound of the rain outside was steady, almost like a quiet reminder of everything she'd set in motion. She sat in the living room, staring at the empty couch where Michael used to sit reading his late-night news on his tablet. That space felt colder now. Everything around her was quiet, except her mind. It was racing, tangled in guilt and questions she couldn't silence. It had been weeks since Sarah introduced her husband Michael to Claire, the woman she once believed would help save their marriage. Sarah thought bringing someone new into their circle might shake things up, might remind Michael what he stood to lose, but it hadn't gone that way. What started as an idea born from frustration and loneliness had turned into something she couldn't control. Michael had changed. He was more distant now, but also happier. His eyes lit up when Claire's name was mentioned, and it broke Sarah's heart every single time. She had wanted to test his loyalty, not lose it. One evening, Michael told her he was going out for a short walk. He didn't realize Sarah had seen Claire's car parked 2 streets away earlier that day. That night, Sarah followed him, not out of anger, but out of desperation for the truth she already knew. When she saw them together, talking quietly, under the dim streetlight, she didn't see passion or betrayal. She saw sadness. Michael wasn't laughing or smiling. He looked lost, unsure. Claire touched his hand gently, and for a moment, Sarah thought she might scream. But she didn't. Instead, she walked away quietly, tears falling down her face as she realized what her choices had done. The next morning, she sat in the kitchen, her coffee untouched, waiting for Michael to come home. When he finally did, his expression was full of confusion and guilt. He didn't need to say anything. She already knew. "I saw you," Sarah said softly, her voice calm but shaking slightly. Michael's face fell. "Sarah, I didn't mean for any of this to happen." "I know," she replied. "Neither did I." There was a long silence. Both of them were standing in the ruins of a marriage that had been built on years of love, laughter and shared dreams, but also quiet disappointments and unspoken words. Sarah finally broke the silence. "Do you love her?" Michael hesitated. "I don't know. It's not that simple. Claire made me feel seen again. But I never stopped caring for you, Sarah." Sarah nodded slowly. "Maybe that's the problem. We stopped seeing each other long before she came along." Her words hung in the air like heavy fog. Michael sat down across from her, his hands shaking slightly. "What do we do now?" "I don't know," she whispered. "But I think we both need to stop pretending this can be fixed by adding someone else to the picture. Maybe we need to face ourselves." Days passed in silence after that conversation. Sarah found herself walking through the house, remembering small things, the way Michael used to bring her coffee just the way she liked it, the way they used to laugh at old movies, how his hand felt when he reached for hers in the middle of the night. Those memories felt like ghosts, now familiar but distant. One afternoon, Sarah received a call from Claire. The sound of her voice was soft, almost apologetic. Sarah, I didn't mean to hurt you. Michael told me everything. Stepping away. This isn't right. Sarah felt an odd mix of relief and sadness. Thank you, she said simply. After hanging up, she sat on the porch for a long time, looking out at the fading autumn light. That evening, Michael joined her outside. Didn't speak at first, they just sat there. The quiet between them finally peaceful instead of tense. I talked to Claire, he finally said. I know, Sarah replied. She told me she's leaving town. Michael nodded, staring at the trees in the distance. I'm sorry, Sarah, I don't even know how to begin fixing this. Maybe, she said softly, we don't fix it. Maybe we rebuild. Michael looked at her, unsure what she meant. Rebuild, yes, Sarah said. Not from where we were, that's gone, but from where we are now. It's people who made mistakes, who hurt each other, but who still care. Michael exhaled, his shoulders sinking with a mix of relief and regret. You'd really want to try again. Sarah smiled faintly. Trying doesn't mean forgetting. It means learning. We lost each other somewhere along the way, Michael. But maybe this is our chance to find our way back, if we still want to. For the first time in months, he reached for her hand. It felt uncertain, awkward even, but it was real. In the weeks that followed, they began small. They went for walks together again, sometimes without speaking much, sometimes talking for hours. They shared coffee in the mornings, cooked dinner side by side. Slowly, gently, they started remembering what it meant to be a team. One Sunday morning, Sarah looked at him across the table and said, I think we both learned something we should never forget. What's that? He asked. That love isn't about control or tests. It's about choice. Every day you choose the person you stand beside, even when it's hard. Michael nodded, his eyes soft. And I choose you, Sarah, I always will. Her heart swelled, not because everything was suddenly perfect, but because it was honest. There was no illusion now, no fantasy, just two flawed people finding their way back to truth. Months later, as they watched the sunset from their porch, Sarah thought back to that dark night when everything seemed lost. She realized that sometimes pain breaks you open only to let light in. The mistake she made, giving him another woman, had forced both of them to confront what they'd been avoiding for years. Their own emptiness and longing for connection. She didn't forgive herself easily, but she learned. Love wasn't about perfection. It was about understanding, patience, and courage. And though she would never forget what happened, she no longer wanted to erase it either. It was part of their story, a painful chapter that led them back to each other. As the evening air grew cool, Michael placed his arm around her. You know, he said quietly, I still can't believe you didn't give up on me. Sarah smiled faintly. I almost did. But then I remembered who we were before all the noise, and I realized I still wanted to know that man again. He looked at her, eyes glistening. And what about the woman I lost? Sarah chuckled softly. She's still here, just a little wiser now. They both laughed softly, genuinely. The sound was simple, but full of meaning. That night, Sarah finally slept peacefully. For the first time in a long time, her heart wasn't heavy. It wasn't because everything was fixed, but because she had finally found peace in the truth. That real love isn't about giving someone else to your partner, but about giving yourself another chance to love again. And as she drifted to sleep, she whispered quietly to herself, sometimes. The hardest way to learn what love really means is to almost lose it. Emily Hart had always loved the quiet, but lately, the silence in her home had grown too heavy. Her husband, Daniel, worked long hours at his accounting firm, and even when he was home, his attention was buried in spreadsheets and late-night phone calls. They barely spoke anymore, except about bills or grocery lists. The warmth they once shared had faded into polite distance. After one particularly cold dinner, Emily decided she needed to get away just for a while. She found an ad for a cabin in northern Vermont, isolated, surrounded by forest and perfect for a weekend of solitude. It was meant to be a break, a way to clear her thoughts. Daniel didn't argue. He simply nodded and said, "You probably need it." His detached tone made her heart ache, but she didn't show it. The next morning, she packed her bag, left a note on the counter, and drove north. The drive was long and winding. The trees grew taller the deeper she went into the woods, their branches creating shadows that danced across the road. When she finally reached the cabin, the sun was setting, painting the sky orange and pink. The cabin stood small but sturdy, its wooden frame aged and moss-covered, with smoke marks around the chimney from old fires. Emily stepped out of her car and took a deep breath. The air was cold, crisp, and clean. For the first time in months, she felt like she could breathe again, inside. The cabin was simple, one main room with a stone fireplace, a small kitchen, and a single bed tucked near a window. There was no TV, no Wi-Fi, just silence. She lit the fireplace, made a cup of tea, and sat down on the couch, feeling the warmth spread across her face. She looked around, noticing how the shadows shifted with the firelight, and felt a strange mixture of peace and unease as night fell. She unpacked and tried to read a book, but her thoughts kept drifting. She missed Daniel even though he'd made her feel invisible for months. She wondered if he missed her too, or if he was buried in work. Not even noticing the empty bed beside him, a sudden sound pulled her from her thoughts, a soft knock at the door. Emily froze. It was almost 9 p.m., and she hadn't seen another soul since she arrived. She hesitated before walking to the door, her hand trembling slightly as she unlocked it. A man stood outside, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a dark jacket and a beanie. His face was rugged, with kind eyes that seemed to study her carefully. "Sorry to bother you," he said quickly, raising his hands as if to show he meant no harm. "I'm Jack. I live in the next cabin down the trail. Just wanted to make sure you got here all right. We don't get many visitors up here." Emily let out a small breath. "Oh, thank you. Yes, I'm fine. Just settling in." Jack smiled, his eyes warm but curious. "Good. These woods can be strange at night. If you need anything, help with firewood, directions, I'm around." She thanked him politely, and he nodded before disappearing into the dark. She locked the door behind him, but found herself glancing out the window once more. His cabin light flickered faintly through the trees, a reminder that she wasn't completely alone. Later, when she finally went to bed, the silence of the forest pressed in. The branches outside scraped against the glass, and the fire crackled softly. She drifted in and out of sleep until a sound woke her taut footsteps. They were faint, crunching through the snow outside. She held her breath, listening. They stopped near the window. Slowly she turned her head, her eyes landing on the thin curtain that swayed slightly, as though touched by the wind or someone's hand. Her heart thumped. She wanted to look, but fear pinned her to the bed. After a few moments, the sound faded. She stayed still until the early morning light filtered through the window. When she stepped outside at dawn, she saw them footprints in the snow. Big, heavy ones, circling near her window before disappearing into the trees. Her first thought was Jack. Maybe he came to check on her. But why wouldn't he knock? She tried to brush it off, convincing herself it must have been an animal. Still, something inside her felt unsettled. Later that day, while gathering wood behind the cabin, she heard a voice. "You shouldn't be doing that alone." She turned sharply. It was Jack again, smiling, an axe resting on his shoulder. He offered to help, and though she hesitated, she agreed. They talked while he chopped wood, simple things at first. He told her about living alone in the woods after his divorce, how he'd once been an architect in the city but left everything behind to find peace. His voice was calm, his laugh easy. There was something grounded about him, a quiet sadness that made him seem familiar. As the sky turned golden, they stood by the pile of logs, their breath visible in the cool air. "You seem like someone who came here to escape something," Jack said, his tone soft but certain. Emily hesitated, then smiled faintly. "Maybe, or someone who came here to remember who she used to be?" He nodded knowingly. Sometimes running away is the only way to hear yourself again. That night, Emily couldn't stop thinking about him. His words replayed in her head, his voice calm and patient. Felt like an echo of something she'd been missing for a long time. Around midnight, she sat by the fire, trying to read again. When she heard it, that same faint sound outside. Footsteps, her pulse quickened. Slowly, she turned her head toward the window. The curtains fluttered. And for a split second, she saw movement, a shadow, tall and unmistakably human. She stood up, her heart racing, and grabbed the flashlight from the table. When she shined it toward the window, nothing was there. She tried to convince herself it was just her imagination again, but the uneasy feeling clung to her. She checked the door, locked it, sat on the couch until exhaustion pulled her into sleep. In the morning when she stepped outside, the air felt colder. The footprints were back, this time leading from the trees directly to her front steps. She swallowed hard and looked toward the woods. Jack appeared again, walking toward her from the trail, holding a cup of coffee. "Morning," he said cheerfully. "Rough night." She studied him, wondering if he knew something. "Did you come by last night?" she asked cautiously. He paused, then smiled slightly. "No. Why?" "Nothing," she said quickly. "Just strange noises." He nodded, sipping his coffee. "This place can play tricks on you. The quiet does that." Then before leaving, he added, "Make sure to lock your doors. Some things in the woods like to wander close." His words lingered all day. That evening, as the light faded and the forest grew darker, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. She lit the fire again, sat by the window, and tried to distract herself. But as she grew sleepy, she heard something, a whisper. It was faint but clear, like a breath against her ear. "You're not alone." She froze. The fire crackled. Her heart pounded. Slowly she turned, scanning the room. Empty. The whisper came again, almost softer this time. "Emily." Her breath caught. She stood, trembling, her eyes darting to the shadows in the corners. "Who's there?" She whispered back, but there was no answer. The room seemed to grow colder. She felt it, that heavy, invisible presence pressing around her. And though she couldn't see anyone, she could feel eyes on her, steady and near. Emily ran to the window and looked out. The forest was dark, except for one faint glow, a lantern flickering near the trees. And in that dim light, field she saw him, Jack, standing still, watching her cabin. He didn't move. He didn't wave. He just stood there, as if guarding something unseen. Then, before she could call out, the lantern light went out. The woods went black. Emily stepped back from the window, her pulse hammering. She whispered to herself, trying to calm down. "You're just tired. Just tired." But as she turned toward her bed, she could still feel it, that haunting certainty that she wasn't alone in the cabin. And when she finally lay down, her eyes open in the dark, a voice deep and low seemed to echo from somewhere close. "You're not alone, Emily. Not anymore." And she knew then someone or something was watching her. The morning after the whisper, Emily tried to convince herself it had all been a dream. She told herself it was the stress, the loneliness, maybe even the sound of the wind through the cracks in the walls. But deep down she knew it hadn't been just her imagination. The voice that said her name still echoed in her ears, calm, close, and unmistakably human. She decided to leave that day, to drive back to town and spend the rest of her weekend somewhere less isolated. But when she went outside, her car keys were missing. She searched her bag, her coat, even the snow by the steps, but they were gone. Panic started to rise in her chest. She tried calling Daniel, but there was no service. The woods surrounded her, quiet and still, like they were holding their breath. Then, through the trees, she saw movement. Jack, carrying a pile of chopped wood toward her cabin. Relief washed over her. She waved and called out, "Jack, wait." He stopped and smiled as she approached. "Morning. You look like you've seen a ghost." She hesitated before saying, "My keys are gone. I can't find them anywhere. I was thinking of leaving early," but he frowned, setting down the wood. "That's strange. Maybe you dropped them near the trail yesterday. I can help you look." They spent an hour searching, but the keys never turned up. Jack offered to drive her into town after lunch to get a spare made. She reluctantly agreed. Inside the cabin, he helped her light the fire again. And they talked while the snow started falling outside. It felt strangely comforting having someone there. His voice was warm, calm, and steady. She found herself relaxing, laughing even, which surprised her at one point. She said softly, "You make this place feel less lonely." Jack looked at her for a long moment before replying, "Maybe you needed someone to remind you that you're still worth being around." The words caught her off guard. She turned away, hiding a small smile. It had been a long time since anyone said something kind like that to her. After lunch, they set out for his truck, parked a short walk away through the trees. The snow had thickened into a steady fall, muffling every sound. As they walked, Emily noticed something odd. A second cabin, half hidden by branches. Its windows were dark, the roof sagging slightly. "Who lives there?" she asked. Jack's expression changed. "No one," he said quickly. "It's been empty for years." But as they passed, Emily felt eyes on her again, the same heavy awareness she'd felt the night before. She turned her head, and for a brief second, she saw a shadow move behind the cracked window. Jack caught her staring and said firmly, "Don't go near that place. It's not safe." They reached the truck, but when he turned the key, the engine sputtered and died. He cursed under his breath, trying again and again, but it wouldn't start. "Battery's dead," he said. "Looks like we're stuck here until tomorrow." Emily's heart sank. The snow was falling harder now, and daylight was fading fast. "So, what do we do?" "I'll stay nearby tonight," Jack said, "just to make sure you're safe. This storm can get bad." Something in his tone was protective, almost tender. Despite the fear that still lingered, she nodded. "All right, thank you." That night, the wind howled outside, shaking the windows. The power flickered but stayed on. Emily sat near the fireplace, wrapped in a blanket, while Jack sat across from her, quietly carving a piece of wood with a small knife. The rhythm of his movements was calming. "You really live out here all alone?" she asked. He nodded. "After my divorce, I couldn't stand the city. Too much noise, too many people pretending they're happy." Emily smiled faintly. "That sounds familiar." He looked up. "Your husband." She hesitated, then sighed. "We don't fight. We just stopped caring, I guess. It's like living beside a stranger." Jack's gaze softened. "You deserve more than that. Everyone does." For a long time, neither of them spoke. The fire crackled and the snow kept falling. Emily found herself studying his face, the lines around his eyes, the quiet sadness in them. He looked like someone who had loved deeply and lost even deeper. Eventually, she grew tired and said she was going to sleep. Jack offered to stay on the couch, and she thanked him. She went into the small bedroom, closed the door halfway, and lay down. But sleep didn't come easily. The whisper from the night before haunted her. She turned over again and again until finally exhaustion pulled her under. She didn't know how long she'd been asleep when she woke suddenly. The firelight from the main room glowed faintly through the half-open door. She heard movement, slow, careful footsteps. Her body tensed. The floor creaked just outside the bedroom. She turned her head and froze. Someone was standing in the doorway. For a moment, she thought it was Jack. But something about the silhouette was wrong. Taller, heavier. She opened her mouth to speak. But the figure moved away before she could say a word. Heart pounding, she got out of bed, grabbed the flashlight, and walked into the main room. Jack was asleep on the couch, his hand still resting on the carved piece of wood. The front door was locked. Everything seemed untouched. She stood there, trembling, staring at him. If Jack was there, then who had been at her door? The next morning, she told him what she saw. His reaction was strange calm, too calm to calm. "You've been through a lot. Your mind might be playing tricks," he said. "This cabin can do that to people." She wanted to believe him, but doubt crept in. Later, while he went outside to check the truck again, She walked around the cabin searching for any sign of what she'd seen. And that's when she found a footprint larger than Jack's. Pressed deep in the snow right outside her window, her pulse raced. Someone had been there when Jack came back. She showed him the footprint. His face darkened, and for the first time, she saw fear in his eyes. "We should go to my place," he said quickly. "You'll be safer there." They packed what little she had and started toward his cabin. The wind was sharp, biting at their faces, and the snow made it hard to see. When they finally reached his home, Emily was surprised. It was warm, clean, and surprisingly organized, like someone had built it to last forever. As she looked around, she noticed something that made her pause. On the wall above the fireplace hung a photo Jack with a woman who looked eerily like her. Same hair color, same smile. She stepped closer. "Who is she?" she asked. Jack hesitated. "My wife," he said softly. "She's gone now." There was something in his voice, regret, pain, and something else she couldn't name. Emily didn't ask more, but the resemblance stayed in her mind like a shadow. That night, she lay on the couch, staring at the ceiling. The storm outside had turned violent, shaking the cabin. Jack was in the next room, but she couldn't sleep. Around midnight, she heard a sound faint, like whispering. At first, she thought it was the wind. But then she realized it was coming from outside. She got up and looked through the window. The storm had slowed, and through the snow she saw something moving near the tree line, a flicker of light, a lantern swaying back and forth. She turned toward Jack's room. "Jack," she called softly. No answer. The whisper grew louder. She pressed her hand against the cold glass. Then she saw him, a man standing in the snow, holding the lantern, looking directly at her. Her blood ran cold. It wasn't Jack. She blinked, and the light vanished. Emily stumbled back, her heart pounding. She ran to Jack's door and knocked. "Jack, there's someone outside." He opened it almost instantly, already dressed, as if he'd been awake. His face was pale. "Stay here," he said firmly, grabbing his coat. "No, don't go out there." She protested, but he was already outside, disappearing into the storm. Minutes passed. Then 10, then 20. No sign of him. The cabin creaked in the wind. Emily stood by the fire, every muscle tense, waiting for the door to open. Finally, it did, and Jack stepped inside, covered in snow, his face unreadable. "Did you find anyone?" she asked. He paused, looking straight at her. "No," he said quietly. "No one's out there," but something in his eyes said otherwise. He was hiding something. She didn't press him. But as she turned to go back to bed, she noticed something strange on his sleeve. Smeared faintly against the snow was a dark red stain. And before she could say a word, Jack said softly, "You should get some rest. Emily, tomorrow everything will make sense." But deep down, she knew nothing about this place made sense anymore. And as she lay awake that night, she realized the one person she trusted might not be who she thought he was. Emily barely slept that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw that red stain on Jack's sleeve. The storm outside had eased, but the silence that followed felt heavier than the wind ever had. Morning light crept through the frosted window, dim and cold. Jack was already up, sitting by the fire, staring into the flames like he was lost somewhere far away. "Did you sleep?" he asked without turning. "Not really," she admitted. Her voice was shaky. "Are you sure no one was out there last night?" Jack hesitated. "I didn't find anyone," he said finally. "But you're safe here, Emily. That's all that matters." His calmness should have reassured her, but it didn't. There was something guarded about the way he spoke now. Something hidden. She couldn't forget the photo of his wife, the one who looked so much like her, or the way his eyes seemed haunted when she asked about her. After breakfast, Emily decided she needed to find her car keys. She couldn't stay here any longer. When Jack stepped out to fetch more wood, she quietly searched his cabin. She checked drawers, shelves, even under furniture. Nothing. Then, behind the books on a low shelf, she found a small wooden box. Inside were a few old photos, yellowed with age. One was of Jack and his wife standing right outside this same cabin, smiling. But another photo made her blood run cold. It was of her standing by her own car, taken from a distance. She recognized her coat the day she'd arrived. Her hand shook as she heard footsteps returning. She quickly put the box back and stepped away. Jack entered, brushing snow from his jacket, and smiled faintly. "Everything okay?" She nodded too quickly. "Just tired." He studied her for a moment, like he could sense something was off. Then he said gently, "You don't have to be afraid of me, Emily." Not. She lied, but she was. Later that afternoon, while he went out to check on the generator, she took the chance to slip out. The snow had melted enough to make the road visible again. She followed it, hoping to reach the main road before dark. Her heart pounded with every step. The forest was eerily quiet. No birds, no wind. Only the sound of her boots crunching against the icy ground. After nearly an hour, she stopped to rest near a fallen tree. That's when she heard footsteps behind her, slow, measured. She turned around and her breath caught. Jack was standing a few yards away, his expression unreadable. "You shouldn't wander off like that," he said calmly. "These woods can be dangerous." "I just needed some air." She stammered. He took a step closer. "You were trying to leave." There was no anger in his voice, only disappointment, which somehow felt worse. Emily's throat tightened. "I thought you wanted me to be safe." "I do," he said softly. "But out there, you're not safe. You don't understand what's happening." Her heart raced. "Then tell me, what is happening?" Jack looked around as if the trees themselves were listening. Then he said quietly, "You remember the voice you heard your first night here? The one that said your name?" She nodded, barely breathing. "It wasn't your imagination," he continued. "And it wasn't me." Emily froze. "Then who was it?" Jack's jaw tightened. "My wife died in this forest 3 years ago. But sometimes I think she never really left." The world seemed to tilt beneath her feet. "Jack, that doesn't make sense." "I didn't believe it at first either," he said. "But I've seen her. I've heard her. She doesn't want anyone else here. She thinks they're replacing her." Emily stepped back. "Jack, stop. You're scaring me." He raised his hands gently. "I'm trying to protect you. You looked so much like her when you showed up. I thought maybe it was a sign. Maybe I could make things right this time." Emily shook her head. "I have to go." Before he could respond, she turned and ran. Branches whipped at her arms, snow crunched beneath her boots, and her breath came out in clouds. She didn't look back until she reached the edge of the clearing end. That's when she saw it, the second cabin, the one Jack told her never to go near. Its door was slightly open now, creaking in the wind. Something about it drew her closer, despite the fear clawing at her chest. Inside, the air was cold and damp. Dust coated the furniture. On the wall, she saw faint handprints, like someone had touched it recently. And then, on a small table near the window, she found something that made her blood run cold. Her car keys before she could grab them. A soft whisper filled the room. "Emily." She spun around. No one was there. The voice came again, closer this time, right behind her ear. "He shouldn't have brought you here." She stumbled back, terrified, and ran out of the cabin. Snowflakes stung her face as she sprinted toward the road, but standing there, blocking her path, was Jack. "Emily." He called, reaching out. "Wait, stay away from me." She screamed, holding the keys in her shaking hand. "I found them. I'm leaving." His face crumpled with sorrow. "You don't understand. She won't let you go. Don't believe you." She cried and ran past him. He didn't chase her. He just watched, his expression hollow, as she disappeared down the trail. By some miracle, Emily made it to her car. It was half buried in snow, but it started on the first try. Her hands trembled as she gripped the steering wheel and sped away, not daring to look back. The forest seemed endless, the road winding like it never wanted her to leave. Finally, she reached the highway. Relief hit her so hard she started crying. She didn't stop driving until she saw the lights of a small diner on the outskirts of town. Inside, The warmth and chatter felt unreal after the silence of the woods. The waitress brought her coffee, and Emily sat there for a long time trying to calm her shaking hands. She told herself she was safe now. It was over. But when she looked out the window toward the parking lot, her heart stopped. Jack's truck was parked across the street. He was standing beside it. Staring straight at her dot, she froze, unable to breathe. For a second, she thought about running, but then, as a car passed by and its headlights swept over the spot, he was gone. The truck was gone to Dot. Emily left town the next morning. She never went back to that cabin. She tried to forget, but the memory stayed his voice, the whisper, the shadow by her bed. Months later, she was unpacking boxes in her new apartment when she found something strange inside her suitcase. A small wooden carving, a heart, smooth and unfinished. The same one Jack had been carving by the fire. Taped to it was a note in neat handwriting. "I'm glad you made it out, but she's still watching." Emily dropped it, her hands shaking. She stared at the carving for a long time before putting it away in a drawer she never opened again. Sometimes, at night, when she couldn't sleep, she'd hear something faint, a whisper from the dark corner of her room. It always said the same thing, "Emily." And that's when she'd remember the cabin. Snow. The man who watched her sleep. But the part that haunted her most wasn't the fear. It was the way he'd looked at her, like she was the ghost, not him. And deep down, she sometimes wondered if maybe, just maybe, the whisper was right. Maybe she hadn't left that cabin at all.